good story. I'd spent so much time in other stories because I never really wanted to go back to my own. I never wanted to write in my own book because I thought that whatever was going to be on the next page wouldn't be anything worth reading. Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and anyone who's ever felt lost in their own story, all of that changed for me when I met Brian. Brian signed his name in my book in broad, bold strokes. We met my first year of college, and a few puns and some Star Wars references later, we were fast friends. I thought I went away to school to learn all sorts of important life skills. You know, how to get a job, build a retirement fund, succeed at that whole adulting thing. Then I chose a liberal arts major, so what are you gonna do? I loved college, but Brian actually taught me more than any class ever did. The first thing Brian taught me about was loyalty. Brian was faithful. Brian encouraged and supported his friends. No matter what you were doing, a performance, a recital, if it was important to you, Brian was there. Sometimes I think Brian preferred to be there just so he had some dirt to bring up on you later. Like the time I accidentally knocked the toupee off of a guest during a dinner show. He was still laughing when I got off the stage. Christy, that was a hair-raising experience, wasn't it? Did I mention he was hilarious? The second thing Brian taught me about was laughter. Brian believed that in order to get through life, you had to be able to laugh at yourself. And you know, most of the time he was right. Anytime something bad happened to me and I got overly dramatic about it, like this is the worst possible thing that could ever happen to me, Brian would find a way to bring me back, level me out, and remind me that it's not so bad after all. Like the time I threw my back out in college and had to be in a wheelchair for a week. He only let me roll backwards down a hill once. Yeah, I can laugh about it now too. The third thing Brian taught me about was courage. In 2005, my father was diagnosed with kidney cancer, and I didn't know what to do. So I called Brian. You see, Brian had a perspective to offer me that my other friends couldn't. Because at the age of 20, Brian was already a 2-time cancer survivor. I said, Brian, how did you do it? How did you stay so positive and so happy through everything that you had to go through? I will never forget what he told me. Christy, I have friends and family like you. You'll be that for your dad, and I'll be that for you. I'm happy to say that some surgeries and 10 years later, my father is alive and well. It was what I learned through that experience, that courage, that I had to summon up in September of 2015, when I got a phone call from Brian. My whole world screeched to a halt at 3 simple words. The cancer's back. I took a breath. I said, Brian, I don't know where the story goes, but I'm going to write it with you. Throughout his treatments, Brian continued to demonstrate the same traits that I'd grown to love and admire in him. He continued to express his loyalty, making events and parties whenever he was able. He continued to show that wonderful laughter, especially when his hair started to fall out. The bald jokes were flying everywhere. And he continued to demonstrate that courage as the prognosis got worse and worse and worse. Although I've been saying it for some time, Brian taught me the hardest lesson I have ever had to learn: how to say goodbye. On August 4th of 2016, Brian's role in my story ended. Or so I thought. He was haunting me! I'm not kidding! And I don't mean it in a ghost of Christmas past sort of way. I mean, he was everywhere, permeating my days, and I didn't even realize it. I saw his loyalty live on in his brothers and his family as they called me throughout their own grief to see how I was doing. I saw his laughter live on in our friends as they poured into my house the night he died to share stories and eat spaghetti, his favorite. And I felt his courage live on in me. As the week after he died, I stood outside of his apartment thinking, what now? What next? I was back to wanting to be in anyone's story but mine, because I knew that the next chapter wasn't going to have him in it, and I didn't want to face that. While I was inside moving some shelves, the answer hit me on the head, literally. When I blinked the stars from my vision, I realized that the book on the floor was this leather-bound tome that Brian always carried around with him when we performed. He played a scholar at Renaissance festivals, and I thought maybe, just maybe, he left me a little bit of scholarly wisdom in this book. I opened it. It was blank. At first I was disappointed as I leafed through the pages, hoping just for a moment to glimpse his handwriting. And then all at once, I realized what a gift Brian had given me. Brian gave me my story back. Brian taught me how to live my life with loyalty, laughter, and love. He taught me to look forward to that next page, to live every day and enjoy it, to cherish what I had. And even as my story goes on, I know that his is never over, because his adventures will continue to live on here. We are all part of each other's stories. We have tremendous power to influence each other and to allow others to influence us. We are the villains or the heroes of our own tales. But more importantly, we're the villains or the heroes of someone else's tale. Who are you in yours? In others? Who do you choose to be? I know that I will always choose to be a Brian, because the greatest gift that anyone can give another person is that joy and excitement of looking forward to just one more page. Madam President.